Good morning, everyone. Welcome to STEMXplore 2026, the fifth edition of the annual STEM Symposium organized by STEM Education on the occasion of National Science Day. 2030 is not a distant future. The nature of work is already changing in how we are defining the problems, how companies are operating, and how solutions are being designed. In fact, the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report of 2025 was saying that about 39% of the skills that the workers are relying on today will become obsolete by 2030. And almost 92 million roles will just disappear. At the same time, 170 million new roles in emerging domains will be created. Those could be in the areas of renewable energy, sustainability, environmental engineering, and of course, AI. So the question for every parent, educator, and student here is not just what to learn, but how to become someone who can keep learning, regardless of these changes in the world that are inevitable. And finding answers to some of these questions is the purpose of this webinar. Hi, I'm Dr. Sonali Das Gupta, founder director of STEM Education. We work with schools and students to implement hands-on interdisciplinary STEM programs that foster innovation through design thinking and a first principles approach to learning. I welcome you all to this panel discussion on the 2030 horizon, mindset and learning. We are honored to have with us today three distinguished guests who bring both expertise and experience spanning entrepreneurship, deep tech research, and cutting-edge science, each with a grounded view of what it takes to stay relevant in a world that is changing faster than our curricula can keep up with. We have with us today Dr. Jitendra Balakrishnan, who works at the intersection of academic research and industrial adoption. He leads TRYST, the IIT Bombay Translational Research Foundation. I hope I have pronounced it right. It's TRYST or TRYST.
TRYST, yep.
TRYST, okay. A dedicated initiative that works end-to-end with industry partners to ensure that breakthroughs in research don't just stay on paper, but become real-world technology. With prior leadership roles in the industry and his current role in connecting the lab to the industry, which personally I find the most exciting, he has a clear view of what students should be building in themselves long before they start their careers. Welcome, Dr. Jitendra.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Next up, we have Dr. Shreya Santra, specially appointed lecturer in the Department of Aerospace Engineering at Tohoku University, Japan. Dr. Shreya completed her PhD at the Space Robotics Lab, Tohoku University, in collaboration with the DLR Institute of Communications and Navigation in Germany. Her work specializes in coordination, control, and motion planning for multi-robot systems, building intelligent algorithms that allow robots to operate autonomously in unstructured, challenging environments. In simple words, robots that can find their way, work together where there is no map. So she's also the co-founder of Spaceport SARABHAI, India's first space policy think tank, working to shape a sustainable and accessible space future. So as someone who works at the very edge of automation, is perhaps best placed to tell us where human judgment still matters and what students need to build to stay relevant. Welcome, Dr. Shreya.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And our third guest today is Mr. Mekin Maheshwari, founder and CEO of Udhyam Learning Foundation. Mr. Mekin began his career as an engineer at Yahoo, went on to join Flipkart. I think when it was working out of a two-bedroom flat, probably, I read it somewhere. And then went on to build one of the most impactful technology teams in the country, and eventually serving as the chief people officer for a 35,000 strong organization. Today, he focuses on something which is probably a slightly harder problem, building entrepreneurial mindsets in young Indians who are rarely part of the future skills conversations. Since its inception in 2017, Udhyam Foundation and Udhyam Shiksha program has reached over 39 lakh learners, and enabled 40,000 educators across 9,000 government schools and ITIs in 12 states. That combination, industry and technology at scale and education at the grassroots levels, gives him a unique perspective of the gap between what classrooms are preparing the students for today and the kind of workforce that 2030 will demand. Welcome, Mekin.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for joining us on this wonderful morning in Bangalore and having this conversation that is at the top of the mind of every parent, every educator out there. So in fact, I will start with you, Mekin. The impact of your program is beyond remarkable. It's out of this world. So you have spent the last several years building entrepreneurial mindsets in young people. At the same time, when we are reading news and articles, every conversation is about what students need to learn: coding, critical thinking, communication, AI literacy. I mean, the list is endless. But you chose to work on something very, very foundational. So, what I would like to understand from you is, at a time when AI literacy was not even on the vocabulary, what led you to build this particular skill in children, and what is it about the entrepreneurial mindset that you believe underlies all of it?
Yeah, thank you. I think important question, and thank you for putting it and framing it the way you have. So I'm new to education, or I've been in education now only for about 10 years. And having been a technologist in the industry, when I started exploring education back in 2015, I came across a lot of definitive or books that talked about definition of education and its goals. And they talked about the idea of knowledge, skills, and mindsets. We find enough in our books about knowledge and information. We have slowly started thinking about skills, that, okay, here are important skills that we need to develop. There is actually very, very little conversation about mindsets. There is very little written about what are the mindsets that young people need to develop or education needs to develop, and how do you go about developing them. In the past 10, 15 years, growth mindset is one where there has at least been some conversation. But beyond that, and that's isolated, there isn't a compendium or a syllabus of here is the set of mindsets that our 18-year-olds must develop or our 12-year-olds must develop. And as I thought about the future, I was fairly clear that what put me on a path, or the other people that I saw do well, was actually a lot to do with the mindsets they carried and a lot less to do with the knowledge and skills that they had. If you build a mindset that allows you to develop knowledge and skills with life, that's something that can hold you in good stead. And you talked about learning to learn. I think that's really the capability, that if you can learn to learn new knowledge and new skills, because the world around us is constantly changing, I feel like you'll be in good stead. This idea of entrepreneurial mindsets, I think of it as good packaging and marketing. That it's important for something to be understood by people, right? When you so the idea that this is how an entrepreneur operates, the set of mindsets that a typical or a good entrepreneur does or uses, what we've called entrepreneurial mindsets. So just quickly, briefly, this is independent thinking, decision making, taking responsibility for your decisions, experimentation, iteration, learning from failure, grit, which is resilience to future goals, and finally, fourth is self-awareness, which is ancient wisdom, knowing yourself. Those are the four that we've called entrepreneurial mindsets. And we believe that in building these, in being able to develop, how do you make independent decisions? How do you discern? How do you need a whole bunch of skills, which require the four C's that you talked about, for example, communication, critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and many more, right? To make this all accessible to people, calling them entrepreneurial helps them see that, oh, this is what an entrepreneur does. The entrepreneur imagines, the entrepreneur solves problems, the entrepreneur is gritty, doesn't give up at the first failure, etc. So the embodiment helps in communication. that's really what we've tried to do with entrepreneurial mindsets. Let me pause. I'm happy to delve deeper into what we've seen or why I feel these are more important. But yeah, I think the core is this is the foundation on which you can build knowledge and skills.
Wonderful. I absolutely love the explanation, and this is why I love talking to people with a science background, calling a spade. Entrepreneurship, it helps the children to relate to it while we end up giving them the skills that they truly need. You tell them you want to do critical thinking and they'll be lost. Why do we want to do critical thinking? You tell them we want you to become an entrepreneur later in life, and that just helps them relate to it and work with it. So I absolutely love it. And you're absolutely right. The skills that we're talking of is not limited to entrepreneurship, right? It is limited to how we learn. Even at the stage when a child is in grade 7, all these skills of resilience, the skills of critical thinking, the skills of not giving up, so-called growth mindset, are still important, are still extremely, not even extremely important. They are the foundations of learning. And that's what we are trying to build with them. And I love the fact that there's somebody talking about the skill sets because it does need to be in the mainstream conversation as much as the competency needs to be there. So competency and mindset together can do wonders for a nation like ours, which has a billion population. So thank you so much for that. I will come back to that question in a bit, but I will hold off and move on to you, Jitendra. And Mekin, I will come back to you on that question in a bit. So Jitendra, that brings me to you. You're now working at this intersection of science, research, innovation, adoption by the industry. And there's this striking shift in the speed at which innovation is happening. I mean, I remember when I was a scientist and I was working in the labs, the accepted timeline for a research solution from the tabletop in the lab to the tabletop in the drawing room was 15 years, maybe. And today we are shipping products in a few months. So, do you see working at the place where you are at this fault line between industry and academia, which have still not merged very well to be seen, are you seeing the space change and alter how the industry engages with research right now and what they think is relevant?
Well, there's a lot to unpack in that. I'll mention one thing. The first is that nothing has changed, and the second is that everything has changed at the same time, right? So I would say that what has changed dramatically and what will always continue to change is the tools and the skills that we use or we need at any given point of time. But the fact is that we are a tool-making primate, and that hasn't changed. And I think that we are fundamentally the same species that we were yesterday and we will be tomorrow. And I think that that drives a lot of, like, I mean, we need to actually put this in context. There's a lot of hype around, oh my God, everything is just different today, etc., etc. Yes and no. I mean, like, I think that Mekin put it well. When you look at mindsets, nothing is different, right? What was needed yesterday is what will be needed 10 years from now, 30 years from now. But like, like who knew an Oracle database 20 years ago, right? Who knew how to drive a car 200 years ago? I mean, those things change all the time, and AI is going to be doing a lot of that. So when you're talking about the speed of change in industry or research or anything like that, I would say that I would break this up into two categories. One is where we are doing things more efficiently, or we are able to access things that we couldn't do before. Like, for example, if I take protein folding, right? Like, that's actually accelerated the timeline for drug discovery.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that drug discovery is going to happen in 6 months. No, it can't, because it basically requires a whole lot of other things to happen. That I think that we need to put these in context. I think there's a little bit of an overemphasis on speed and time. But I think that what we really need to be talking about is progress and not how fast it happens. We need to be talking about what we could be doing in the future and not get hung up about this concept of like everything happening in a hurry. Because when we do that, I think that we start losing focus on the big picture. So when you're talking about industry, those changes are very different. Again, where you're talking about it. Like if you're looking at the startup world, I mean, the whole point of a startup is to do something which you actually can't find otherwise happening. And if it's actually part of an established setup, there is no need for that startup. right? And so you'll find a lot of interesting and innovative ideas coming from over there. But when you look at established industries, right? So automation, like on a robotic line, it changes over the space of like years. I mean, like, and Shreya could probably tell you a lot more about it. But what's happening 5 years from now will be dramatically different from now. But 6 months from now, probably not, right? But you have to really look at it in terms of the context in which you're placing these. So there's a lot of change happening, yes. But I think that if I go back to what Mekin was saying, that fundamentally from what is needed of people, I think that we need to look a little deeper than actually the tools and skills that are in play today.
I completely love it. I mean, if I were to take away one thing that I hear from your answer to that question, and yes, as you said, there's a lot to answer in that, but from what I'm gathering is things are moving fast, but we probably need to step back a bit, have a bigger picture than being the person on the roller coaster to being the person seeing how fast the roller coaster is moving. And whether the speed of the roller coaster is too fast to actually forget about the engineering that will keep it in place.
I think when you're on the roller coaster, you're busy screaming, not looking at what's going on.
Which is what's happening right now, I guess, at some point. You're right. And it's important to have that context, I guess. And in this entire conversation of context, I think that's my takeaway, that it's important to have context. The context that an engineer has, the context that a school child has, or the context that a parent has. What is the context we are looking at it, and how do we then prepare with that context in mind? So that's wonderful. Thank you so much for bringing this out so clearly. I will also come back to you on that. I wanted to ask another question, but I think I want to come back after Shreya has answered to what you said. Domains will matter. What research remains relevant, whether it's protein folding today or whether it's AI taking over the jobs of lawyers, because there's so much data-backed work that's required. It will all happen at some point. But all of these questions, if you're looking at it right now in this moment, they become clearer when we look at the fields that are kind of pushing the absolute boundaries of what technology can do. And Shreya, you work in that world. You work in one of the most technologically advanced fields today, where AI, automation. So from that vantage point, I will bring the question aimed at students. So from that vantage point, where you're seeing this remarkable progress happening on a daily basis, what do you think young people need to learn in order to still continue to be relevant in that field which is already being taken over by technology?
Thank you, Sonali, for the question. So I would generally try to reiterate what Mekin and Jitendra mentioned about the mindset and how you approach technology. So yes, technology is advancing every day. Like 4 years ago, when I completed my PhD, not much was known about AI or even AI and robotics. But in the last 4 years, there has been a dramatic application of AI-assisted experimental tools, and how we can accelerate innovation in a way where humans and robots can collaborate together. So, and in the next, if we are talking about 2030, it's just 4 years from now. But still, it's very difficult to predict what will come in the next 4 years. Things can change in the next 2 days, or because of the limited, limitations of resources, we can have a more stagnant progress in the next 4 years. So what still remains relevant is that we need to understand technology is not a competitor for humans, but more like a complementary thing. So we need to learn how we can work as human AI or human machine interaction. And no matter how advanced technology will be, the human judgment, the critical evaluation, the creativity or creative intelligence will still remain with humans, because humans can work with new data, or we are much more creative than machines which works on existing data. So they basically work on data patterns, the different things that they observe in the world. But humans have that kind of capability where we can reason, we can take decisions based on uncertain environments. So that's what I think is should be the mindset, where we know that we are the creative being, and we can use technology, we can advance technology in our benefits. So that's my
Wonderful.
answer to that.
Thank you for that. I mean, I agree and disagree at the same time. So I will say something. I wouldn't call it disagree, but I have my inhibitions. And the inhibition comes from the fact where I'm reading about this tremendous progress that machines are doing right now. And specifically, let's come back to the elephant in the room, AI. So when we talk of creativity, when we talk of what humans have a tendency to like, that can all be coded. That can all be put into an algorithm. I mean, Mekin has been working with lakhs of learners, and we are talking about people where the children are developing critical thinking using, let's say, an AI assistant. So my question to all of you is actually, in this case, where probably in a few years, anything that can be computed can be handed over to the machines. In that scenario, what is the argument of the human intelligence at all? Like, what does it mean for a young person who is learning today? How do they go about, how do they navigate their learning? Because what to them, in their horizon, everything can be done by the machines. So how do we get them out of there and help them to navigate how to learn? I will open it up to the panel, and please go ahead if you want to pick it up.
I'm happy to start.
Please.
Yeah, so Sonali, 3 days back, on 5th of March, Anthropic released a report. I'm hoping, or I'm thinking that most people on this call have had a chance to look at it.
Yes.
And I think it had a few interesting parts. So one, as in, it talked about domains where there is already advanced usage of AI, and domains where, and within that, so one, there is a clear separation between domains where there is actually significant usage of AI,
True.
like in coding, like in management, like in law,
Yes.
like in finance. And then there are many domains where there is actually no usage of AI today, right? Whether it's construction or agriculture or
Yes.
transportation, repair, etc. There is actually very little usage of AI today. But beyond the usage, for it to actually get proliferated, and Dario, for example, talks about how we discovered the polio vaccine almost 50 years back, and yet the entire world isn't vaccinated, right? So the gap between information discovery, or discovery that's in
And
bits and
execution.
to translate to atoms, to translate to actually change happening on ground, is a key difference, right? So by definition, artificial intelligence works in the spaces of bits and bytes, right? It can tell you, but it can't do things for you, right? So everything, so all domains that require any physical work, uh, as in they can use AI as a complement, they can use AI for adding things, but it's some distance before robotics comes along, before AI can actually start cooking for you.
Serve you breakfast, yeah.
Right. So
I love it. I love it. Actually, that brings me to the report. I was reading an article. Jensen Huang said it, right? 2 months ago or a month ago, that plumbers and electricians are the only ones left with the job, will be left with the job in the next few years. I mean, that's an over exaggeration.
yeah. So I want to actually take it back to thinking first principles, like bits and bytes, like artificial intelligence works with bits and bytes versus atoms, right? Similarly, and this is what Shreya was hinting at, that humans have a few other capabilities which are going to be very hard for artificial intelligence to develop. Empathy is one, right? That for
Yes.
me to have the empathy of the pain that you may have experienced as an individual is something that's not easy for AI to experience unless AI is told, right? Imagination is another, right? That, hey, I have this idea, and it's hard for AI to have, as in with all the information, it can have many, many ideas, but what are the relevant ideas? And you touched
And what's
upon
the outlier? What's the outlier? Yeah.
And some of this we saw when we saw chess programs start to overtake human capabilities a long time back, right? Where they were playing chess very different from how humans play chess. And so in a finite game, that's easily beatable, humans are easily beatable, right? But if you think about like raw creativity of things where there isn't existing data, there isn't existing information, there are ways in which problems can be solved, and then the judgment of, hey, how do you decide which one is important, which one is more relevant, what will actually. And right now we have enough Twitter viral threads about AI actually proposing nuclear whatever
Yes.
as against. So I think this, whether this is idea of judgment. So I'll just recap, right? That the basic empathy, imagination, building stuff, doing things with your own hands in the physical world, and judgment of what's more relevant, what's more important. I think these four are, in my head, just a starting set of four capabilities that we will probably be way ahead of AI for a long time to come.
Again, the context comes into picture, the perspective. I'll actually go to you, Jitendra, on that note. I mean, as Mekin said, as Shreya said, and I absolutely love how you put it out there. What's important, there's a timeline before we can think that all of this AI replacing humans, you have lost the race if you don't know AI. I want to come back to you and ask that as AI takes over more of the execution, we are not talking about the skills at this point. Let's say there is execution in certain fields that we are outsourcing to the AI. And the nature of how humans are contributing is shifting. That's a given. What we are contributing in that entire process is changing. It's probably going to be even more along those lines, where it's less about what you know and more about how you can see through the smoke screen and identify the relevant points that help you reach your goal. So my question to you is, in that scenario, what does agency look like for a young learner? And what is it that would remain invaluable as we go forward from your perspective of looking at application and also hardcore research that's happening at that vantage point?
Sure. Okay. I think there's. I'm going to ask everybody to look up this one article, which basically lines it up beautifully. It's titled "The Turing Trap," like Alan Turing, the father of computing. The Turing Trap. It's by this guy called Eric Brynjolfsson, who's at Stanford. So just Google it, you'll find it. It's right at the top of that. So that article outlines two distinct aspects of what execution looks like in AI, and it distinguishes between automation, which is how to do things that we already know how to do, but more efficiently. That's automation. The second one is augmentation. What does this tool allow us to do that we could not do before is augmentation, right? So these two are very different, and his argument is that a lot of technological progress focuses on automation first, and the value of that gets captured disproportionately to the people who drive the automation. And this is what we're seeing, that four companies basically are controlling the entire conversation about about AI and so on. But augmentation is actually where the human being comes in, because it goes back to what Shreya is saying. AI interpolates, generative AI interpolates between all human knowledge known at this point of time. When it starts extrapolating, it goes horribly off track, right? And so I think that this is actually where we come in as humans and saying that, like, look, we can actually now think about this in terms of a tool that we have that we could not do before. It's like saying that earlier I had a hammer and everything was a nail, and now I have a screwdriver, and suddenly the range of things I could do has expanded. Range of things I can build has expanded. That's the mindset. And so you use that word agency, and I think this is the critical thing. And it goes back to that whole mindset conversation, right? A sense of agency becomes more and more important when something else can do what you took for granted before, right? If you basically are locked into this mode saying that I'm going to be moving things from point A to point B, point A to point B all day, and you forget the fact that you could do other things, right? Then you will be in danger of getting replaced by something that can move things from point A to point B better. Now, this is what people are talking about, saying, oh my God, software jobs are going to be lost, and et cetera, all of this stuff. It is exactly that, right? But I think as humans, we do need to capture that sense of agency, and this is what we need to encourage in kids. And this goes back to the whole discussions of entrepreneurial mindset. That's fundamentally a sense of agency. It's like, I'm taking it into my own hands to do things that matter. Mekin broke it down beautifully, but this is fundamentally it. If you forget that part, then you will be left behind. If you learn that and internalize it from day one, I think you're looking at a very powerful tool which could help you do things that you could not do before. So I'll stop over there.
I love it, love it. I will reiterate what you said. It is not that you will be left out if you leave, you will be left out because you don't know AI, but it is you'll be left behind if you don't build your own agency of being able to do something. So
Yep.
I absolutely love that. I'm going to take that as a quote and probably go to it elsewhere. But thank you so much. So I'll come back to Shreya now. So this whole conversation started with Shreya, and Shreya's conversation, I said I probably need more clarity because I'm coming from a place where I see students day in, day out, and I'm sure Mekin does as well, where students and parents are in a sort of panic mode. What do I do? What does my child do after 10 years? Is there any job left in IT anymore? It comes down to the whole tangible conversation from a big picture view to here and now, right? So looking at the next decade, this is what I would like to ask you, Shreya, since you work with automation, as Jitendra said, difference between augmentation and automation, and you work very closely in that area, right? So looking at the next decade, or maybe even beyond that, from your perspective, what do you believe? Which domains will still remain at the frontier of research and industrial demand? And in order to identify those industries, in order to identify those areas of study, deep higher education, what should the students who are right now in high school be looking at? How should they approach this difficult choice that they have to make?
Thank you for the question. So I'll start with a very simple social experiment that I recently read about, that very evolved AI models that are currently in use, and some kids of 4, 5, 6 years were given a task to come up with an animal that does not exist, an imaginary animal that does not exist. So the kids came up with absolutely new things, like they drew the animals or creatures that do not exist, their features don't exist, or they have not seen that kind of animal. But in the AI models came up with a mix of animals that already exist, like a very weird mix of lion, eagle, and dolphin, for example. They looked very realistic, very nice, like aesthetically, but they were not new. So this is something that I think comes in the picture when you are thinking about uncertainties or unanticipated conditions. And if I look into your question of what are the fields where we can develop our skills and be relevant, I think there are several fields. As we already discussed, that AI works with a lot of data, the existing data. But for humans, there are so many existing problems that can be solved. And and the students who are now in school and will be getting into the job market in the next 4 5 years, they need to be very open to what the world is going through, and also like develop skills like solution based mindset, and also interdisciplinary synthesis. You cannot think of doing just engineering or trying to get into the IT sector with just learn coding. No, like if we talk about climate change or environmental engineering, bioengineering, space engineering, all these things, in the next 4 5 years, the scenario will change. We want to focus more on sustainability. We want to focus more on empathy and ethical use use of all these resources. So the students have to develop that kind of mindset where they can solve a problem. Problem formulation is definitely there, but approach it in a solution, to a solution based. So always think of how they can solve a problem, whether it's in biology or in medical or law or whatever. So I think that's the main criteria. So the students have to be very open to where the world is going to be, and all the different limitations that are there in the path ahead of us.
So can I just
Wonderful.
add? Can I just add one
Please,
thing to what
please.
Shreya said? It was absolutely spot on. I mean, I think that when we are thinking about emerging fields, I would say let them emerge, right? Like, and I think that identifying problems is far more important than identifying a solution, right? Like, so I mean, like once there's a problem given to you, anybody can solve it, right, with the right tools. That's where AI comes in. But finding the problem, that's something which is a completely different. And that's the basis of research, right? Like finding the right problems. And I think that like the other part of it that she mentioned, I want to emphasize: don't think about fields or competencies. Think about impact, right? Is basically like, like if you figure out what is needed in the world, it doesn't matter whether it's mechanical engineering or visual arts or digital marketing or law or whatever it is. The mix of that will automatically come through. So if you think about it as a competency, as where you start your learning journey, and then you begin to explore everything else and pull together people who know all these other things, like a mixture of experts is basically like bringing in the AI context, right? So that is a lot more effective than saying that, what should I learn? Should I go into mechanical engineering? Should I go into marketing? It doesn't really matter as long as you know how to pull all of these things together.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think the fact about identifying the problem also brings us to a very inherent capability that is probably, again, not discussed as much, which is the empathy. Because you can identify a problem, a pain point, only if you can relate to that. And relating to that comes from building empathy for the environment, for the people, for the world we live in. So it all just boils down to that. But I have a question for you, Mekin, at this stage. That when we are talking of building skills like risk taking, critical thinking, now there is a change in how what children are exposed to. There is a change in what young people are exposed to. So does that mean the definition of risk taking, the definition of critical thinking itself is undergoing a change? What is your experience with working with so many young people?
Yeah, I think both of these are actually loaded words, and they mean different things to different people. What risk taking
Yes.
means, what critical thinking means,
Yes.
already not necessarily definitive. So I think trying to talk about possible change in them is, they're already changing, or they're always different for different people. Um, I I I feel that again, the core principles of how young people can learn, or including how actually adults can learn. So yes, there is pedagogy and andragogy, and there are elements that are different, but uh, way we synthesize experiences into learnings and then start applying them, right? Many of those principles again have stayed reasonably finite. Like, you cannot empathize with someone who you've not met. It's much harder for you to
True.
empathize with someone you've not met. So like physical experiences, right, which are visceral in nature, to actually be able to be with someone, to be in their shoes, which is the definition of empathy, uh, actually, so enabling young people to have wider and wider set of experiences, uh, especially socio-economically, that our schools and our apartments have become extremely homogeneous.
Yes.
So you then actually have very little diversity of socio-economic experiences. And without those experiences, it's very hard to empathize for anyone who does not live inside the apartment or inside the school. So how do you have porous schools where you enable and allow, actually have a lot more of the world coming into the school and the school going into the world is extremely important in today's world, because without that, you have no chance of empathy. I think the reason we have the kind of divisions that we have in the world today are around this idea of othering people, that, oh, I am not them, they are different, right? And we know, and like on a recent trip, for example, I met somebody who was leading Khan Academy Pakistan. I'm on Khan Academy India's board, and we were discussing about our own lineages and roots. And like in a brief 10-minute conversation, I felt a lot of warmth and camaraderie for this person who belongs to Pakistan, right? His parents came from parts of India, including South India and North India. And so we have a lot that is common to us than what, as in socio-politically or politically or geographically, what is said out, right? But we're letting the politics drive even the human behavior, right? So I feel like human beings and young people actually develop having diverse experiences, both socio-economically, politically, to be able to then build their own empathy, right? To then be able to build their own, like, what do they care about? So them actually going out in the nature, and then they will start caring about the nature, right? I feel like in trying to teach sustainability from a way of this is the righteous thing to do is almost like teaching religion, right? Which from a scientific temperament point of view, you actually want them to build their own scientific temperament and their own experience of here is how this can be done. So I think those which is diverse experiences, a lot of building something
Hands-on.
absolutely, right? Like take a problem and build a solution.
Just
Right.
go for it. Yeah.
Absolutely, right? And no age is too young, right? That in the process of building and iteration and interactions with its potential customers, you will realize how to think, right? You will build creative thinking or critical thinking in some of these spaces. The way we've talked about or we've tried to teach critical thinking include things like trying to debate from one side and then in 5 minutes flip to the other side, right? And people find it viscerally hard. Like I have found it viscerally hard that if I have debated about a topic from one end and then suddenly you are asking me to switch, right? As in your body you can feel the difference and you can
It's your core.
yeah. So but that which is, hey, can you start seeing things from the other side, is an important piece. Similarly, like identification of facts from opinions, a very very basic requirement. Like 3 days back I fell for an AI generated video, and it's sad that we did not put in guidelines around and I think some of this is going to bite us fairly quickly, right? That
Yes.
because
Yes.
we do not have disclosures of, hey, what is AI generated and what is human generated. It's very easy to spoof that, is this AI generated, is this a real footage, etc. uh, and it's going to be very hard to build the critical thinking at scale to be able to build that differentiation, right? But to be able to differentiate facts from opinions or fake from real is probably amongst the largest pieces of critical thinking that need to be built,
True.
because otherwise
True.
we all become very susceptible to any pathway, whether religious or political or uh, right, where you blindly follow that. Oh, you it's very easy
True.
for us to believe something.
True. I mean, we live in a scary world, and it is here to stay, and it is only going to get murkier and murkier. So it is so important that the children, we develop the age, again, coming back to that agency of figuring out what is true and what is not, and understanding where you belong, what you stand for is probably going to be even more critical than the technical skills, which are devoid of any kind of human perspective to it, which have no human perspective, human element to it. And I think I love the fact how you call the whole idea of diverse socioeconomic experiences as a porous school. I work with a few schools, and the way they have integrated this entire socioeconomic awareness in the children of the community that they are building in is incredible. And I think we need to use it. I absolutely love it. I'm getting so many quotes here. The porous idea of porous schools, where you talk and you interact with children, people from diverse socioeconomic, really important for children to build the empathy that we expect them to build or want them to build. But unfortunately, I think we have just scratched the tip of the iceberg at this point. Each and every statement that all of you have made can go on for hours and hours. But we are coming to the end of the time together, and it has been an eye-opening conversation. I've absolutely loved it. I will open up the conversation to the listeners who are here. But before that, I want to close with one question from each one of you. A very precise answer. Take your time to answer that. But for something every parent, every educator or a student who is watching us right now in this conversation and is confused or is even looking to just strengthen their belief that they are doing this right. We all need that validation. So I would like you to answer this one question. If you had to advise a high schooler today who is thinking about their future in 2030, what is the one ability that they should start building right now, regardless of the field that they eventually choose? So, open to you. Take your time.
Just one?
Just one. Yes, we have three
Well,
of us. So
I will actually start with one thing they should not do. Okay?
Okay.
Like the thing is with AI, it's very easy to outsource your thinking. But do not do this any more than you will hire a robot to lift weights for you at the gym.
Perfect.
Right? It makes absolutely no sense, because the minute you start outsourcing your thinking, the minute you start saying that the creative process becomes something I can outsource to AI, hey, create a story for me, you've lost it right there. Right? I would say that use AI to refine and synthesize if you want, but do not outsource that critical thinking. It might be easier today, but you will kind of suffer for it in the long run. So I'll use that one negative do not statement.
Negative results are important,
This.
and I mean, I love that, because negative results are more important than positive results in research, as we all know. So I absolutely appreciate you going that way. All right. So do not outsource your thinking to AI, just like you would not ask a robot to lift the weights in the gym. Perfect. Thank you so much, Jitendra, for that. So
Yeah,
open.
I think I would support that with a more like saying that humans are these high schoolers who are getting into this field and in this world, stepping into the world. They should always learn how to develop the skills for accountability, risk management, because AI will give a great sounding board for expanding your curiosity, creativity, and also can help accelerate all the innovation. But AI cannot take accountability for whatever we humans are doing. So that is still inherently a human responsibility. And we should be very ethical in this aspect. So I think this is something that growing students should learn and keep an open eye to it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think accountability is something we didn't get a chance to touch upon during the conversation today, and that's absolutely essential. A sense of responsibility towards the rest of the community on whatever we do. That is as important as being able to do it. So thinking about how it's going to impact the community is something you should never lose touch with. Love that. Thank you, Shreya, for that.
Yeah,
Yes.
I love that too, Shreya. And I think I couple it with the idea of courage, right? That to have the courage to do what you intrinsically feel is right. And actually, I'm going to just build on that. That I think the one ability I'd love for young people to build is to be able to reflect that when they have a thought or a desire, is it coming from a place of conditioning? Is it coming from, oh, my peers are doing this, or this will make me look good? So being able to reflect and introspect that where are their thoughts and desires coming from, and if they can be surer and surer that this is not because of some incentive or some conditioning, then to have the courage to follow those thoughts and desires, right? That, hey, if they feel like, hey, they should be doing this or they should be solving this, then to have the courage that, hey, it may be counterintuitive. Um, for example, setting up a nonprofit after having a tech career seems counterintuitive, but it's given me more joy than most of my earlier career. And I see that amongst many, many people who've not followed a traditional path, right? Who've followed their heart. But I think first start listening to your heart, or get to the point where you can, and it's easy for it to become whimsical and be romantic about something, uh, but actually be like a sannyasi or do tapasya around it, which is that, hey, do the hard work of, is this really what you want to do, and do you have the courage to do it?
Absolutely. I love that. I think it all kind of pulls everything together. The self-awareness, the intrinsic motivation of why you're doing what you're doing. And I can relate to you, Mekin, becoming a technologist, becoming an NGO founder, working with grassroots level students, or me doing the research that I was doing, and suddenly I'm talking to school children and explaining quantum physics to them. But the joy that it gives you keeps you rooted, keeps you rooted to why you are doing what you're doing. And that's what ultimately then leads you to the resilience. Because if you enjoy what you're doing, you will be able to come up with a way to continue enjoying, come what may. And that boils down to, that brings us to the end of this conversation and boils down to three main things. Yes, Jitendra, please.
Can I just add one specific recommendation on a topic that people should explore in the terms of critical thinking?
Yes.
Understand and go deep into cognitive biases, right? Like just look up this term. It's a very deep area, and figure it out experientially. Don't just read about it. Understand what confirmation bias actually means to you in real life. And there's experiences like of all kinds, and some of them I think we already talked about implicitly over here. Understanding cognitive biases is probably the biggest contributor you can have to critical thinking in terms of a prescriptive avenue, right? Like, do this and you will get better critical thinking. I cannot think of anything better than cognitive bias. It does not matter which field you're in. It does not matter what you do in life. This is critical.
Yeah, true. Thank you for adding to that. So I will just sum it up for everybody out there. The one ability that each of them were forced to say, not 10, comes down to reflection, comes down to accountability, comes down to agency. And being aware of not outsourcing your thinking, being aware of what you want to do, and having the courage to continue to do it, irrespective of whether it is AI today or some other technology tomorrow, will probably take away some of the smoke screen that we have right now in front of us, where you can't see where 2030 what 2030 will look like. So if you are well spaced in these areas, the fog will clear itself up as you start approaching the horizon. So thank you, Jitendra, Shreya, and Mekin. If anybody has questions in the listeners, we will take it up. We have overshot by a little bit, but if anyone has questions, please drop it in the comment section, and we can request the judges to maybe stay back for 1 or 2 more minutes and answer those. Is this being recorded? Is this the lobby? I think. Okay, so somebody is asking, being a high schooler, from these abilities, what are the specific skills that will always give an upper hand regardless of the field? For example, coding or robotics. Yeah, would anybody like to pick up that question? Very interesting.
Yeah, I think solving a problem and picking problems and identifying problems that are important, and then being able to solve them, that as a skill. I think whether it is coding, whether it is robotics, whether it is AI, whether it is, those are, we just talked about, they are the current tools. So even when I was hiring engineers back in 2002 at Yahoo or 2009 at Flipkart, I would insist that the coding language didn't matter. And this is just the same idea taken multi steps forward, that just like The syntax of the coding language today doesn't matter, right? The fact that coding itself, more than the coding, it is the thinking, right?
Thinking.
And so in coding, for example, there is the idea of pseudocodes and algorithms, that those algorithms matter a lot more, and the pseudocode that you write, which capture your thinking, matters far more than the coding itself. And in the thinking, even before the thinking is, hey, what problem are you choosing to solve, right? And I think being able to learn that, oh, this is the problem to be solved. So do you have agency or do you become a tool? And if you happen to have agency and you can decide for yourself that, no, this is a good problem to solve, to say that, no, I don't want to support things that will enable more killing, is actually having agency, right? So are you in a position to make that? Do you even think that way, or do you think of yourself as a tool where, hey, if I learn this, I will be more useful? I feel humans can be much bigger than just be useful.
Wonderful. Shreya, would you like to add something to that, especially because the person asking the question here is asking specifically about coding and robotics, and the field of space is, like, I think, the most interdisciplinary space we can think of. Would you quickly like to add anything to what Mekin said over there for a child who
definitely.
maybe doesn't have the perspective we have?
Definitely. Can you hear me fine? I think I lost. Yeah. Okay. So I want to answer this in a perspective from, not from the student side, but from the educator side, or, educational institutions. I think the educational institutions will focus more on experiential or experimentation skills, where they should bring in all the interdisciplinary aspects of how to solve a problem. For example, a space mission. How do you solve an uncertain situation where a robot is stuck in an environment that you never anticipated? So that kind of situation, it's not just coding, but you have to do some critical thinking. You have to already make a decision in a way where you don't lose the robot, because it's a one-time thing that you have sent it to space, and you don't know when you'll get the funds to send it again. So these kind of approaches of interdisciplinary thinking, systems thinking, so thinking it in a way where all the systems work together so that you can achieve your goal, is very important. So it's not just coding, it's not just mechanical designing that can help you in designing a successful space robot or a successful automation manufacturing line. So yeah, that's my approach.
So
That's
again,
my
the thinking,
answer.
the thought process,
Yeah.
the thought process, the system thinking, the design
And
thinking, first
yeah,
principles.
and the educational institution should be very much actively involved in giving these kind of experiences to the students.
Yeah, that's a conversation for another hour or another month, probably. But we will leave it at that. And from a student's perspective, you have all the ability. If your thought process is clear, you have the agency within you to develop those. So essentially, what we have discussed today clearly shows that there's this constant struggle between building what is known and preparing for what is not known. And that's the struggle we have to live with. And that's the struggle we have to navigate through, between the comfort of a right answer and between being able to make sense of what is showing up when there is none. And that is what we want. That is a constant struggle that will exist. And that is the ability that we need to build to be able to navigate, whether it is 2030 or 2040 in the years ahead. So thank you everyone for joining us today in this opening note of STEMXplore 2026. There's much more to come for the viewers here over the course of this symposium, including the various student competitions that will ultimately lead up to ISC Bangalore next week on Sunday. And if you are a parent, educator, or student, I hope that this conversation gave you one thing to think about differently today. Thank you all for being here. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you for